And welcome back to another episode of the Filmistines. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today I am joined by my deceptive friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
I'm glad everybody could join us today because we are going to talk about Edward Berger's 2024 film, Conclave, with Ralph Fiennes. This is a strange movie, but I'm happy to report back that it is mostly phenomenal. We land in some funny places. It's dealing with something I never thought I might want to see on screen. And I will say on some level, this film feels deeply personal. Of course, I have no idea if it is. It comes from a 2016 novel of the same name. But at times, it almost feels like Cardinal Lawrence is this character trying to shed light on how we, or maybe just the Cardinals, have lost sight of just why they operate in the fashion they do and why any of this matters. Almost like the filmmakers are shaking someone by the shoulders of, are you looking at yourself? Do you hear yourself? Kind of thing. And maybe even little jabs, maybe death by 1,000 cuts kind of attitude of having too much faith and it kind of turning into certainty and losing sight of not knowing and really defeating the purpose and ultimate power in having faith. I love the premise, the setup. We invite all these cardinals running for pope through some tiered election. We lock them in like they're on a reality TV show like Love is Blind or something. It's awesome. And it's awesome when the expected drama of doing that to a group of people comes to a head immediately. They are so nasty to each other, but in the most elegant way. It's pretty masterful. You go from trusting certain characters like Stanley Tucci's character Cardinal Bellini to not trusting him from scene to scene because he's at some point being very humble and then at some point calling out Lawrence about, well, you just want this, don't you? You're just like all of us. It's like, oh, what do you mean? The clicks, Tedesco with his vape, the setting people up, the inability to trust leaking into the voice of reason in all this. It's awesome. Of course, we landed in an interesting place that we're going to talk about, but I'm very curious how you feel about Conclave.
I liked watching this movie. It was dramatic. It was intense. It kept me on the edge of my seat. So the movie watching experience was there for me. I believe while we were watching it, you said something that it could give this whodunit vibes. And I really like that because the suspense was very well crafted. I was suspicious of everyone. All of them. I never once trusted Bellini's character. He didn't come off like a trustable guy in the beginning and then was like, whoa, man, nah, I didn't trust him. And even our protagonist gave me some reason to doubt him at, I guess, 1 or 2 points, not a lot. There wasn't that much action in the film. Not that I needed some. I guess these are old cardinals. What can they really do as far as action-wise? And it's not the place for it. They're holding this election to choose their new pope. But besides that, there's not much else to it. I guess you have to enjoy that process and how it comes about to enjoy the film. A lot of information is brought to him. He doesn't really go and try to investigate. He does at some points, but it felt like it was just being handed to him and now he had a role to play and choose what he needed to do with this information. This was definitely a different movie than what we're used to seeing, because a lot of movies that we see that deal with popes or religion are mainly horror films. There's not many where we get to see it in all seriousness like this. And the movies we do see like that feel old. So this movie was a bit refreshing in letting you know that it's not really like that, especially in modern times. And that ties in with the whole overall message, this tradition versus progress. What is faith and what has it become? The movie is beautiful. It's stunning. I loved those vivid reds against the neutral colors. And this visually helped tie in that tradition versus modernity theme that we have going on. But besides this heated election and the drama or melodrama behind it, I didn't really know what else to say about the film, especially with the end. The end left me a bit confused, I guess. I can't put my finger on it if it felt anticlimactic or if it felt like it didn't really stick to the point that the movie was making. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. There is an extreme element of melodrama where really any kind of nuance and subtext, apart from performance, is really kind of laid to bear. Outside, I will say, the ending, too. It seems a little out of left field in the context of this voice of reason trying to negotiate with a high school of future popes. Because there almost seems to be a missing component of like the religiosity of what's going on. Because we also have an equally strange moment where Cardinal Lawrence is talking about the people, the cardinals, sort of losing faith by having too much faith and it becoming certainty.
Right.
It's kind of an equivalent moment of strangeness that doesn't seem to matter in what's happening. You know what I mean?
Yes. Because we also had this question of people in position of power. Who is made for this type of position, this position of power? Is it the people who are, humble enough to know they don't want it? Which also felt like we didn't go anywhere with that, even though the film was leading us on that this might be Cardinal Lawrence. But then he has this conversation with Bellini where he's like, what would you like to be called if we do choose you as Pope? Because it could happen. And he's like, John. Like, wait, so do you want it? You already had that name picked out. So it further confused me, I guess, with questioning whether now maybe he deserves it because he doesn't want it.
Well, mind you, he is the voice of reason in the film. And so he's going to let kind of, God speak through these cardinals, and they're going to ultimately decide who's going to be the next pope. And that's ultimately out of his hands with, the exception of the nature of the politics, I guess. So, of course, any reasonable pope is going to be, I guess, in some form ready to become a pope, any candidate pope.
Yeah, I don't know about that because he spent the whole time telling us he doesn't want it. He's even thought about resigning. He even let the recently deceased pope know that he didn't want it. And he gave that speech about having too much faith to the point of certainty that it seemed to me he would never admit to even thinking he had a name for that position. So that's when I came slightly suspicious of him. Like Bellini when he was all humble about it. And then at the end, he's like, well, of course we all want it. It's like, oh, well, now you're showing your true colors, dude. And it felt like another one of those situations to me. Not as extreme, of course.
Well, I mean, maybe even more extreme on some level because he's in the best position to kind of play the politics of being the spokesman, being the arranger of the conclave, right? He's probably going to have the floor more than anyone else. If he played it strategic enough, he could probably have a lot of influence over whatever pope he wanted, right? But he tries to play the most neutral ground within reason, right? He's got his own motives, right? He thinks Aldo's the best vote. And yeah, I think that kind of sense of temptation and, human nature kind of coming to the head is really played up with Adeyemi's demise, right? When Lawrence goes to his little apartment thing and discusses what happened. And Adeyemi almost feels like another Tedesco, right? He's this other villain type character where we don't want him. He's a traditionalist, yada yada. And all of a sudden he's humanized to the nth plus one degree. when Lawrence goes to his room. And I think it's very easily the most powerful section of the film. And he says something like he's going to have to restart his forgiveness kind of thing, or his walk to being eligible to be a pope. And he'd been on this journey for 30 years. It's powerful stuff, right? It puts this man who looked like he was going to be the pope back down to just being a regular human type thing. Kind of reminding us that the popes are just humans. So, I mean, I think you are rightful to be a little confused. I'm there with you on, like, the through line. Because I do think the crux, it's kind of obvious, I guess, once you say it, but the crux of the film is just the politics of fleshing this out to get to an end. Whatever that end is, once it ends, like the movie, it's just it. You know, Trump gets elected, and now we stop fighting over X, Y, and Z. So I'm sure something very similar happens when the Pope gets elected, right? Although the Cardinals are, I don't know if journals are writing about Cardinals and popes, current popes, about doing X, Y, and Z. I don't know if that happens. Are popes more sacred than world leaders? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because then we had those bombings.
Those were strange, right?
Like, what? Are people against this? Or is it just to say how crazy elections can be?
Yeah, totally. And it made me kind of think, is there going to be a spy? You know, like, but it just continues to play up the level of politics of the situation from every angle. Because if you look at every angle independent of each other, it's kind of hard to, I think, see an ultimate point of what faith means. Who's the rightful pope? What goes on in your body and your head is between you and God type thing. Even just the ethics of running a conclave. And I guess I suppose I ultimately love that this very abstract idea of the inner workings of when you put cardinals together and the politics that go along with where they want to take the church is kind of backdropped with a very high school reality TV type thing. Like, they get trapped in there. Like, what's that show called? Big Brother, where they're stuck in a house together?
Yeah, or something like America's Next Top Model.
Oh, yeah. There's something really kind of sexy about the idea, funny enough, how much gossip that can breed. You know, you've got these people from all the corners of the world coming together who, half of them probably know who they kind of serve under, like Tedesco or Adeyemi or Tremblay. Like, they kind of know their place, and you see that pretty much immediately. Like, it's just like 4, 5, 6 guys. And then you even have that moment where the new foreign exchange student kid becomes the most popular. It's just like, well, that's a little familiar.
That's funny.
And so the marriage of the politics and how the melodrama is displayed is awesome. I will say the marriage of this almost like bunker, like high-end bunker hotel thing they have going on upstairs or wherever.
Hotel is definitely what I was thinking.
Married with the classic cathedral, right?
The Sistine Chapel, yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's weird seeing cardinals, pope-like figures walking around in this almost dystopian kind of looking hotel type thing.
Yes, it's very visually striking. Even those scenes with Tedesco vaping, it throws you off. Or knowing that they can use computers, you know, that kind of thing. Of course they can use computers. Of course they have some kind of computer system management, but you don't think about those things. And I love that you say high school, because in their dining area, they look like they were at a cafeteria. They didn't look like they were at a religious place feasting with gold cups or on wooden tables, but they looked like they were at a cafeteria in a high school all eating lunch, talking about the mean girls in the school.
Yeah, and the Italians were sitting with the Italians, the French were sitting with the French, the African dudes were sitting with the African dudes.
Yes.
It was awesome.
But then you go into places like the Sistine Chapel. I believe that's where they were voting, right? They're using fountain pens and they're burning their letters, and the paper they're writing on just looks very old. Then we go back to that hotel with the red doors, and it's crazy and it's weird, and I really much enjoyed how this movie looked.
It's a masterclass of visual storytelling, no doubt. I was kind of mentioning it, but that ending section where Benitez talks about how he has some woman parts inside of him and they discovered it when he was getting surgery on an appendix, and he was negotiating having them removed or whatever, and he figured God made him in such a way on purpose, with purpose, presumably, as a cardinal, and now Pope. It's a powerful note to end on, because our Cardinal Lawrence here is like, what? It's a lot to throw on, even after all this has already happened, right? This is a very dramatic movie, very melodramatic, very he said, she said. Well, it's just a bunch of he's in it. So ending on Cardinal Lawrence being kind of confused on if this is right or not, I think is a little bit of a confusing point to end on. But it is kind of just more of the same of the secrecy, the sinners in us, the just human nature. So I do think it fits, because especially it ends as wild as it starts. It's immediately kind of crazy when all the cardinals show up and the conclave is going, right?
Yeah, the recent pope died, and now we got to find a new one.
But is there a hint of a message of, if I was made this way, if God made me this way, I should be okay with it? Is there a message of Christianity, Catholicism, losing sight of what it means to have faith?
Yeah, it was definitely weird for me. It wasn't even a situation of maybe he was female and then transitioned into male, and now that's kind of questionable, It was, he was made like this, and he really didn't even know until he went in for that surgery. He obviously didn't let that affect him so much, but he chose to be okay with a chromosomal anomaly, which I guess doesn't seem that extreme to me. And maybe that's the point. It doesn't seem as extreme as Adeyemi having a child out of wedlock, or Tremblay basically sabotaging Adeyemi and lying about the previous pope wanting to fire him.
Yeah, he's kind of the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, it's either him or Tedesco. And Tedesco, we don't get too much of him. They just keep saying he wants to go back to the old ways. But we get this really almost dark humor thing where he makes a remark about we don't want a certain kind of pope to be elected, and then they zoom in on the black pope. It was pretty funny. So I don't know if that's worse, retrograding all the progress you have managed to make, but they're definitely up there. That this revelation at the end was very mild compared to that. Like, oh, that's fine, dude. I didn't even know why we had to bring this up. Why did this even need to get mentioned?
Yeah, because it's like the one thing that's really just out of his hands.
Right.
Out of Benitez's hands. He was born that way. That's why it makes me think it has more to do with the question of what goes on in my body, in my mind. Like, for example, we see Lawrence dealing with his faith, dealing with his love for God, maybe, or his trust in God.
Yeah, like he's questioning prayer and maybe what the point is.
And that's kind of echoed throughout, and that seems to be where we land, where these things are kind of no one's business outside of you and God. It's part of our nature to doubt.
Yeah, and I can get that. I can get behind that. But it just doesn't seem that big of a deal to me. I feel like Lawrence questioning his faith in God or his faith in prayer is normal, but that's maybe a bigger deal than someone who was born like that and can't help it at all. But I'm also not very familiar with the rules of what it is to become a pope. I don't know what there is on gender and body regulations. I know they can't have kids out of wedlock. They can't even marry, right? See, I'm not even sure on those. So maybe there's something there I'm not getting completely. That would be a big deal if I knew.
But it seemed like at the same time that those regulations and rules seemed kind of antithetical to what makes a good pope a good pope.
Yes.
Or what makes someone the rightful kind of mind for it.
Yes. But that maybe would have helped solidify that progression that we need.
Yeah, there should have been a tighter focus on the importance of living in that doubt. But instead we land on something extremely concrete where everything else is very abstract and melodramatic. And then we land on this very immutable trait, you know?
Yeah.
It's like if we landed on Adeyemi winning the papacy and we land on, well, you're black. It's just like, well, okay. You know, but they made it a point that that's maybe not so good. You know, Tedesco's like, we don't want a black pope as the camera zooms in. It's a great shot because it's going between like the cafeteria of the popes and stuff.
And it's one of those moments that's like, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. It's
really cool. And then, but it's kind of emphasized with Lawrence's reaction, right? It's underlined well. It's hard to get a read on it. Is this just going to be controversial? Because, okay, it's just going to be controversial, but it ends. So we don't really get a taste of what that might mean because there's also not a tight enough focus on this matter being solely political.
Right.
Because it's kind of not. Maybe we play into the fickleness of humans, you know, where Lawrence gives his spiel about faith and certainty, and then everyone votes for Lawrence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Benitez says something against Tedesco, I think, and then they all side with him. It's just like, oh, okay, you know, there's a natural fickleness here, a feel-good kind of thing within everyone. So it's hard to think that it's deeply political, or at least any more political than a high school setting, because I think you'd see that exact same thing happen at a high school setting, where the greatest campaign, the loudest campaign, the most colorful campaign might be most likely to win, right, at a high school.
Mm-hmm.
The funniest, right? And it's kind of funny because I loved everything about this, and then we land there. I'm just like, I don't know what that was about. That was a weird ending kind of thing. And I hate to be, I'm really not even going to pretend to be that person where, you know, bad ending, bad movie kind of thing. But it might be something I need to marinate on a little bit more.
Yeah, it definitely throws you off. I'm there with you. The end hit, and I was like, wait, what? What? What just happened?
All right, man. Well, thank you for watching this movie and talking about it here today.
You're welcome.
Do you have a budget guess?
My budget guess is 60 mil. This movie looked expensive. It looked good. It was 2 hours. Granted, we didn't have that many sets. We didn't have that many people. But we had a lot of fancy looking things. Like the bougie hotel. Like the chapel. Like their badass cardinal outfits. So I don't know.
Well, it says here that it was 20 million.
Whoa.
And it went on to make 76.5 million.
Hey, that's good.
And over on Letterboxd with 520,000 people, they weighed in at a 3.9.
Wow, that's actually pretty high.
Yeah.
So people like this movie.
Yeah, it's a big hit. I think it's getting nominated at a bunch of stuff. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, from the few reviews I saw, very few, like 1 or 2, which is nothing at all, but those were very positive. I did, however, see there was a lot of controversy behind this film, so I wasn't sure if it was going to be rated high or not. But this was at the Golden Globes. I believe it won Best Screenplay. My score is not concrete whatsoever. I'm still thinking about it because I had such a fun time watching the movie.
It's a trip.
It was a drama. And, ooh, that guy has a kid. He slept with a 19-year-old. This man over here is lying. I can't trust this man. This man's got weird chromosomes. Like, oh my gosh.
Did this man kill the Pope?
Yes.
That's how it makes you feel.
There's a drunk guy. Like, okay, like I'm here for the watch. But then after watching it, what else did I get out of it?
Yeah, what's the point?
And that ending did leave me confused. I'm with you on an ending should not ruin a film for you, but it definitely threw a curveball for me. Thinking about the film further confused me. So it's very hard to separate the two. So I'm going off of how it made me feel, which is probably what I should trust the most. And I was here for it. I'd recommend it. I gasped. I went, oh, what? You know, that guy? Really? You know, I was here for the melodrama. I really was. So I think I'm going to give it a 3. Because if it wasn't for just based on my feelings and my reactions, I'd give it a much lower score. But I didn't give too much thought on the visuals, so I don't know. Like I said, it's not concrete.
I will say Conclave is easily one of the best 2024 films.
Yeah, I don't know about that. There were some musicals in there that I quite enjoyed.
Oh my god.
Because we had Wicked, Mean Girls, The Color Purple. I don't know. That's your words, not mine.
Well, Mean Girls is way better than Wicked. And that's about it.
That's all I have to say about that.
There's a lot of wonderful moments in Conclave. A lot of 10 out of 10 moments. But how they all come together definitely stifles the film for me a little bit. Because on one hand, there's this flash in the pan kind of vibe of just capturing this wild event.
That's true. You wanted some originality. When have you ever seen a movie about the Pope election process?
Yeah. But on the other hand, there does seem to be this emphasis on having faith through the lens of human nature. And maybe that observation of our human nature is some of the point of kind of how serious and how silly and how much it all looks like high school from the right angle. There's something charming to that. But yeah, I think this is a solid 3.5 for me. Because at the end of the day, it's working on all cylinders. Great score, great performances, great visuals, great context, great story, great writing. Some of the pit stops are just a little strange, and I don't know how they sit with me. And ultimately, more importantly, how they kind of fit in the bigger picture. Or even if they really need to. I'm not sure. But yeah, man, thank you again for talking about this movie, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Filmistines. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Our next episode will be on Edward Berger's 2022 film, All Quiet on the Western Front. Please look forward to that. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Come right in. Remember, we post every Wednesday and Friday on all of our free feeds, and every other Monday on patreon.com/filmistines for Patreon exclusive episodes. When we hit our Patreon milestone, we will put out exclusive episodes every single week. We appreciate all the support. But until next time, thank you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Filmistines. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives on the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon at patreon.com/filmistines. And follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is The Filmistines, signing off.